Welcome to Just Business. This week on the podcast, is efficiency always a positive in our work? Then let's talk about the importance and danger of charisma in the startup world. And finally, if you make it to the end of the podcast, Henry and I are going to discuss when we think you should go full-time as a founder. Henry, this week I'm writing an article titled, "What is Lost When Time is Saved?" It's based on kind of like some growing feelings and opinions I've been having about this new Google product called NotebookLM. Have you heard of it before?
No, I'm not incredibly familiar, but loosely, yes.
Yeah, okay, so Google launched this new AI product called NotebookLM, which is basically Google Docs smashed with their like Gemini thing, where like you get to upload entire sources, notes, reams of text, like somebody had put in like an entire book into the context of this like writing tool, and then essentially you get to prompt it to ask it questions to help you synthesize information, like extract like aspects of text or notes or stuff like that, and basically like speed up your writing process. It was co-developed with this author, Steven Johnson, who we've actually talked about on this show before. He's the author that wrote How We Got to Now, which is that book on like 6 different important innovations. And I've been reluctant in some ways to try NotebookLM, but this week and last week I took like a kind of a deep dive into the product. You know, I'm someone that's currently writing a nonfiction book. This product was designed for people like me who have like reams of quotes and notes from books, and you know, like I have 150,000 words of like different drafts of chapters. Like I should be in love with this thing. But while I've been actively using it, I have felt like something is being taken away from me in terms of like the speed at which I can like ask questions of my resources, and like it will spit out like opinions essentially. And yeah, it just got me thinking about this whole like idea we have, specifically I think in America, but like, you know, everywhere in like Western society, that like efficiency is very important. Like in Steven Johnson's like blog post where he's like launching, you know, like this Google product and telling people about it, he talks about how there's like a lot of toil in like sitting with all of your like, you know, resources, and like if you are a writer that like writes everything on flashcards or whatever, like there's just a lot of work that goes into constantly sifting through that information. And he was like, and it would be great if we could just like completely avoid that, and you could just essentially semantically search through all of your stuff. And I've been feeling like there's actually something very important about that work as a writer. Like just to take this use case specifically, that like sitting with the information for days, you know, like sifting through things to find stuff, rereading sections of books because I like don't like remember the context of like something I scribbled on my Kindle and stuff. Like that time spent, I think, is actually super valuable in terms of the outcome of my own thoughts, right? Like the opinions I have, the point of view I can create, and the narrative that then follows that point of view. Yeah, and so I've just been thinking a lot about like how like AI, creative work, all this stuff, like what are we losing when we save time? Is it something you've thought about before or like have opinions about?
It's been coming up recently in the LinkedIn sphere of we're all just reading what LinkedIn has prompted us to write with AI. It seems very inauthentic. It's less engaging. I think engagements are going down because it's like the interpersonal communication is getting replaced somehow. And so I feel like there's a lot of sentiment around the fact that we're going to bounce back from this, or this is going to be rejected rather than pushed through in terms of like AI writing social media content. So we'll see, but that's kind of where I've run up against this recently.
Yeah. How do you feel about like the Like the through theme of the article I'm writing this week, which if you'd like to receive a notification when I publish that, subscribe to my newsletter, always be plugging. But like the point of the article is not to say that like this tool is bad, but that like there is something lost when we save time. Like it's the moments of reflection that we have with material. If we're thinking about writing, there's a story that I might cut for time, but I have a story where I'm talking about like my dad mowing the lawn with like this massive like lawn mowing machine, and like what would his day look like if he mowed the lawn with a scythe like in the eights, like, and just like the, not to say that either one of those is better than the other, although friends of mine will tell you I love a good scythe, like
no.
Grim Reaper over here. But yeah, that there's like a meditative time to reflect when there's a quietness, when you don't use the machine. Like we think so often, I think specifically too as entrepreneurs, about like how do we save people time? And I don't think often we think about the other side of that, which is like what is lost when the time is saved. Yeah. Any other thoughts or ways that you think this applies to your own life?
I think it is right on the money when it comes to your persona as an author, right? Like you don't necessarily want to replace that work or automate the process. And from a business standpoint, I think the term efficiency is saving money and saving work. So if I can work less, my life will be better. But I think now that we're almost in this automation and digital automation age, there is not less work. Like we're not in a world where, oh my gosh, we can just play so much more.
Exactly.
No, we're working just as much. And so efficiency almost kind of loses the teeth a little bit. It's not following through on the promise. You're saying you're going to give me all this efficiency so I can have more time to play. Where is it?
Yeah, I talk about Parkinson's law, which is the law that like work expands to time allotted, which is something we hear so much about in entrepreneurship, as a way of promoting us to set deadlines and all these things. What we don't think about is the flip side of like, that means that if we are a little bit more efficient in our work, we will just expand to include more work. And like, there's an inherent belief that that's a positive, that like adding more work into our lives is like good for us, when like I think we're kind of starting to realize that that's not true. And like, yeah, what are we doing with the time that's saved? Like even when I'm not trying to call you out a little bit, but like
please do.
Thought that this would be like an interesting topic to talk about, which is the project you're working on. RepBot is like a way of like making it so that like talent managers, brands, creators have like a more efficient time gathering brand deal information and then like making brand deals happen. And there's a world in there where like the efficiency gained from like having some sort of automated tool walk brands through all of the necessary questions that usually happen in this like toily feeling back and forth between a brand and a manager, or a brand and a creator, like that if we just automated that, things would be better. And the thing that I want to pose to you almost live on this podcast is like, what do you think is lost when that time is saved? Like relationship between the brand and the creator, like this reciprocity, which is the thing I talk about all the time, which is like technology sometimes removes us from these like times of human connection. Like, do you feel like there's anything there? And like, how do you wrestle with that question?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I might not be able to answer it incredibly authentically because I'm kind of drinking the Kool-Aid myself, but I think that RepBot's mission is to automate the middleman. So I want to make it easier for brands and creators to connect and have that, I guess, authentic human connection to drive a business relationship. Now, by automating the middleman, hoping to give more leverage to creators, but just speed things up, efficiency, as you put it, what's lost is a feeling of I'm being taken care of by another person.
Totally.
I have somebody who's fighting for me in my corner. I have somebody that I can blame when things don't go right, right? Like, make me more money, talent manager. I need your help to, close this deal and find me a sponsor for this upcoming thing. that's lost, right? So you've taken away that person. Now that's the job of our company to kind of replace that with something comparable. But yeah, when you automate something, you're replacing a human, and that human is somebody that you can relate to and trust and vent to and, you know, convey emotion to. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing you do lose.
Yeah, something I thought about, like that was something I had kind of written down, was for a lot of creators that like I know and that we worked with at Lumastec, like it's a lonely game, right? Like most of the time you're spending your days by yourself if you're independent, don't have a team. And like usually your manager is the first kind of teammate that you have in this project, other than, oh, you know, if you're like have a significant other or some other form of like, you know, partner, friend, whatever. I'm not trying to devalue those, but like in terms of in the business, like the manager is usually the first one for that creator, and that like provides a great relief of the loneliness that comes with the job. And in some ways, like that's also lost, right? This like relief from the loneliness. Again, I'm not saying this to say that like all efficiency is bad, right? More to say that like I don't think we often consider this. A place where like I think it gets more like hairy and like more negative, right? Where like efficiency like over, you know, is an overcorrection, you know, and you start to lose more than you're gaining, is, I feel, a lot of like the use of AI in terms of like messaging summaries. You know, like so much of like AI right now seems to just be like, I'll summarize an email, you know, and then like set, you know, or I'll write an email with AI, you send it to you, you'll summarize that email with AI, read that, and then send me a reply with AI. And it's like, at some point, we've just completely broken down all communication in the name of efficiency. And I think that that's bad.
I think I agree with you. Right now, I'm kind of predicting or anticipating that goes away very quick. Like,
So you think the one use case that actually AI companies seem to have found, you think that's like donezo, right? You think, and I agree with you. I think we've jumped the shark. The specific thing I wanted to bring up is that we're summarizing like text messages from our mom. Like that's just crazy.
I don't think that's going to stick, personally, because it is such a break from authenticity and human connection. And at the end of the day, that's all we want. Like, period.
Totally.
In everything that we do as people, we want that authentic human connection. So I think that this is a step too far in automation, and especially the text and email summaries back and forth will go away, because at the end of the day, just write more concise emails and the problem is solved. Like it, I don't think the trend will continue, personally.
Yeah,
Could be wrong. Could be wrong.
I agree with you, and like that point about like taking away human connection. I do think that's when like this starts to get that's the summary of what that's the AI summary of what I'm trying to say, is like where this flips and like starts to break down. The thing I wrote that again might be cut for time, but this is like a quote or something that I've been writing, is like, the thing that's lost when time is saved are the beautiful inefficient moments where we spend time being human. Like that's really it, where we're being bored, right? Like where we're forced to like, you know, listened to our own thoughts, you know, instead of like moving on to the next thing in some like cascade of never ending work. Like the stillness that comes with doing something in an inefficient way. This is like why hand tool woodworkers are like obsessed with that craft, and like people are obsessed with that hobby, even though, you know, like there are also so many people that are obsessed with like these hyper efficient maker tools like CNCs, 3D printers, all that stuff. It's because there's something peaceful that comes with this like old school, like kind of quiet tech. I don't know if that's a term, but that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I often think about like my work day and how I don't really get a lot of peace throughout the day. Like I was watching The Gentleman on Netflix last night with the girlfriend, and kind of a violent show. Not sure if I recommend it, but it
I love that show.
And I liked the original movie as well. So it's definitely good, but definitely violent. But the thing that stuck out to me last night was the idea of like having a cup of tea in the afternoon like that
Hmm.
little peaceful,
Yeah.
quiet moment in the countryside, you know, before, during, and after your workday. That seems so attractive to me. Like, I would love to have that. Why can't I build that into my own life? It
Right.
doesn't seem very hard, but when you're focused on efficiency and you're head down thinking about your productivity and your value and what you're building and what your work is, it is hard to put those peaceful, tranquil moments in. This is a podcast more about business and startups and
Hmm.
entrepreneurship. And so I'm curious, how do we tie this into benefiting founders, benefiting entrepreneurs? Can you put a price
Totally.
tag on these tranquil moments of not saving time? Or how do you justify doing it? Other than maybe the fact that it feels good.
Well, this is actually a huge thing I wanted to talk about with kind of the comparison of like Repbot, right? Like how do you knowing, right? Like that there's something valuable in the inefficiency, right? If there's something valuable in efficiency, there's this like white glove concierge feeling of trust, human connection, all that stuff. That's then something that we can try to add into our products, right? This like layer of like human connection, like those inefficient moments where we spend time being human. I think this is why companies that have such human old school support systems are so highly rated in terms of like customer service and all that stuff, is because yeah, the phone machine that can work 24/7, take as many calls as are available, all that stuff, like seems like the more efficient thing, and therefore seems like the thing customers would want. The problem is that there's something lost when time is saved, right? And there's like, I don't know how to fit my call into the 8 options, and there's like the feeling of I'm in a stressed moment in time and would like support in talking to a human person who can share in this struggle with me, right? Like, and
Yeah.
and that I think is like a big example of like where founders can kind of like take this moment of like reflection that efficiency is not always the best thing for you and your business and actually apply it to the products that we create. What do you think about that, Henry?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time not just hearing automation as a stand in for efficiency. I don't know if you would agree with that or you would distinguish the two.
I think that there's like, yeah, like I guess making something more efficient is always like a little bit of automation, like to go back to the lawnmower example, like the lawnmower is automating the swing of the scythe, right? And it's making that more efficient by doing it a gazillion times per second, right? Like, so yes, I agree with you that there is a lot to the automation aspect of it, but I think it also applies to like even the how we work of it all. Like if you think about project management tools, something that we were making, right? Like the efficiency that project management tools usually give you is like a system, a workflow. Some ways like that's like automation, but in other ways it's just a systematizing patterns of behavior in order to make things move faster. It's creating it's applying an assembly line to your work. And in that case, right, again, thing that's lost can be like the creative flexibility to do things differently, right? Like I think anybody working a corporate job right now might feel like some of their systems and processes do not actually make them more efficient, right? But yeah, so there's stuff that's lost. So yes, I agree that automation is a big part of it, but that's where I would put the distinction of like efficiency versus automation.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sorry. Tell me, what am I responding to? So I agree. Do we want to apply this to my project?
This was the like, what do you think about the application to founders that like adding these moments of what feels like inefficient humanity actually will make your business better, with the example being like good customer support? Do you feel like that's a fair argument?
Yes, I do. I think how you make your customer feel sometimes just gets looped into your branding, right? Our brand
Mm,
is orange and orange warms you up. Like we're It's almost like that subjective feeling that's conveyed through images and sounds and how you advertise. And so branding normally, I think, takes up a lot of that. But the idea of actually conveying that humanity through your processes is kind of interesting. Maybe that's more powerful than branding. I think about, recently switching cell providers. They're all evil, I'm sure, so we don't need to defend anybody. But the customer support on this new one is incredible. First ring, I'm getting a human connection, and it makes me feel really good, and we're really taken care of. And because of it, I'm giving them money. Like, we're bundling everything through them because there's a human there. So, and that's not related to the branding. These guys aren't branded as, oh, we're going to take care of you. We're customer service oriented. They just have a really good process for that customer service. So maybe that was too in line with your example, but that's a personal experience of mine recently.
I think that's good. If I had to provide a counter argument to my own argument, right, it's that, like, in this example of like human touch, customer support, whatever, there's an idea that, like, if the customer support, I feel like this is a thing that a lot of technologists and like technocrats and founders probably would say, like, it's like, if the like product was good enough to not require support, right? Or like if the flows for setup or whatever you're trying to do were like more tight and well designed and all that stuff, like almost perfect, right? Then like no one would care. No one would care about this human connection piece because they'd be able to get the thing they want to get done. And I see that argument. The thing that I would suggest or say is that, like, one, that's never true. Like, you can never have a perfect product. And I'm not like sitting here trying to defend needing customer support. But the thing I do want to defend is that, like, presenting what seems like inefficiency at first glance might actually make your product more quote unquote efficient, right? Or just like nicer to use, which is, again, I think something that we don't often think about as founders, product developers, or just like people who may be obsessed with tech.
Yeah. This is definitely one of our more abstract ideas, I think, of like.
That's why it's taken me 2 weeks to write this article. So like, yeah. I had a whole story, Henry, that I thought I was going to do in the opener about, like, there are 3 bricklayers and one is using like a new technique and blah blah blah. It's like it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain, but it's something I've been wrestling with. And to loop it all back, like, I have been writing a book now for almost over a year. NaNoWriMo was the time that I wrote kind of the first draft last year. And that's longer than I thought it would take me because I'm naive and I've never written a book before. Also because, like, my workflow and style is like rough and circular and strange. And like, I have to sit with material for a long time and write stuff out and think about how I'm feeling and thinking about something and then go find new material and do that again. And it's very inefficient. Right. And so the idea that I could just upload everything I want to talk about to an AI and then say, hey, can you tell me how I should think about this and how everything connects, feels like very enticing. But also, I think that there's something significantly lost in terms of gathering my own point of view from doing that. And that's not to say that, like, all writers that are using AI are writing worse material or having less point of view. Just for me, I think that the thing that's lost by saving time using this tool is more valuable, and I want to keep more than the time saved in terms of being able to publish this sooner. Henry.
Makes sense. That makes sense.
Thank you. Transitioning us to topic number 2, something a little less heady, a little more concrete. Let's talk about the importance of rizz. Let's try to go for that Gen Z audience and talk about rizz and startups.
Yeah.
You were the one, Henry, that kind of inspired this. So, like, do you want to give like a little intro to the topic, or you want me to do it?
Yeah, sure. So I think we've been circling around this idea that leaders and leadership is so important to getting anything done, whether it's in politics or startups or business or law or writing or anything. Leaders have a big influence on kind of what we do when it comes to productivity. And that being said, charisma is one of the core strengths of good leaders. And charisma is kind of a fickle thing. It doesn't necessarily mean you're morally good or bad. It doesn't necessarily mean you're attractive. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a good speaker.
Hmm.
It's a combination of things for sure, but it's certainly important. And if I maybe boil it down even more direct to the startup world, when we're thinking about building something from nothing, no one of us can predict the future. So we're
Hmm.
not sure which startup is going to succeed. The ones that are funded, the ones that build good teams, the ones that attract customers, the ones that grow, are normally driven by a charismatic leader that gets people excited. So, if there's one secret cheat code about making your startup work, it's probably unlocking your charisma. So, what does that mean? Do we buy this? What do you think?
I like in so many ways agree with you. Like if we look at the trend of like famous quote unquote successful, even just like notorious founders and business leaders, charismatic, right? Like the charismatic leader is the thing that's like a common checklist item, and for like an investor, like being likable is a common thing that allows you to build a team, right? Like a lot of things center around this idea of like, yeah, being a charismatic leader. I feel like in so many ways, that's the only reason we got as far as we did with Lumastic. Like we didn't have like the strongest idea. I was not the strongest technical person. I was not good at marketing or sales or whatever. I just think that for whatever reason, I'm a generally likable guy. Like I'm
Yeah,
grateful for that.
goes a
I think
long way.
yeah, it goes a long way. Not only in terms of like gathering team, like I don't think like, Keith would have joined my like whack idea, like basically sight unseen, like at this dinner we went to. Had I not, been generally likable, I don't think that I would have gotten into any of the accelerator programs that we got to be a part of if I was not just somebody who seemed earnest and like I was trying to be not only a good steward of my company, but also a good steward of like the community and other founders that I was interacting with. And so I think that that's totally true. The thing that you alluded to, and I think is really interesting, is that like in so many ways, this is the fundamental strength and fundamental like danger of founders, right? Like we can think about, very charismatic leaders. Like I'm reading right now a book about Paul Newman of Newman's Own Salad Dressing. And like that guy, very likable, like just kind of a goofball, like very eccentric. Just he would start making salad dressing in his basement in his horse barn, but he was also an actor and a race car driver, like all that stuff. Like seems like a great dude. Then you see on the flip side of like, and like was incredibly successful, like outsized anybody's thoughts. I also just finished rereading At Blood, the story of Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes, who also was an extremely charismatic person, right? Like at the end of the book, the author talks about, maybe whether or not Elizabeth Holmes was like a sociopath, but like being a sociopath doesn't prevent you from being charismatic, right? Usually they're hand in hand. And so in so many ways, it's like an important thing for a leader to be, and also like not the only thing, like you need to be right in order to like build trust, like over the long term, be successful. I don't know. So I see kind of both aspects of this. The harder thing too is that charisma, because it is so heavily weighted, is then kind of like a blinder, right? Like being likable is the blinder that prevents us from seeing that like behind the scenes someone is like playing a game with you, right? Being more manipulative than they're letting on.
Yeah, I think you're rightfully going down the path of where are the dangers. What I think what's important to clarify is humans are extremely emotional. When we want to get things done, we should use the most effective method. Charisma is the most effective method, but bad actors will also use the most effective method. So kind of being
Mm-hmm.
aware of, how things get done, how you build companies, how you rally support, how you increase productivity is going to help you as a leader, but also help you as potentially a customer or a follower or an investor to be able to kind of see past it a little bit, despite us being so emotionally driven.
What would you say to somebody who considers themselves charismatic and to be kind of like the charismatic leader founder about like reckoning with the dark side, right? Like where
Yes.
do we go from, I think about this all the time actually, like where do we go from being charismatic and likable for good and charismatic and likable for maybe our own gain, if not just evil? Like, yeah, how do you reckon with that?
Yeah, so if you find yourself to be charismatic, I guess first we might give that a loose definition. So we might
Mm-hmm.
say you're a decent communicator, you are authentic, and you don't just have a goal, you have a vision, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
making $10 million, that's a concrete goal, but making the world healthier, that's a vision. So if
Mm-hmm.
you have these three things, I would probably say you fall into the camp of being very charismatic in
Yeah.
the
And if
business
you don't
world.
know, if you don't know you have those things, I think like recognizing if you're a person in a room that people follow, I think that's a way of knowing, you know, whether or not that you have this kind of like skill and therefore responsibility. But continue, Henry.
Yeah, so I would pick right up at that and say, how do you take advantage of that responsibility to do good? And that's making sure that your vision and your authenticity is helping people. I was recently talking with a founder who is in my same industry of the creator economy, and he said something that is a bit sad, but he said, it's not going to be possible for you to attract investors unless you're screwing somebody over. You're either screwing over brands or screwing over creators. It's the only way. That's sad. You don't want to be the founder who's leading a company that's their underlying vision, right? And nobody's going to come out and say that, but it's your job to make sure you are like objectively not doing that. You need to be very bold in your authenticity against doing harm like that. You want to make things better, not take advantage of a group of people.
Yeah.
That would be some advice.
In so many ways, I think that that's like not always entirely possible, right? Like minimizing harm as much as that's like, you know, a topic we've talked about on this podcast. And like, I think about all the time. I, in the world we live in, like in the economy we live in, the way that our systems are set up, I don't know if that's always possible. And in that case, I think that it's incredibly valuable, valiant, and like brave for you as a founder to come out and acknowledge who you're screwing over, you know, and own it, right? Like I think in so many ways, like I have great respect for founders that can do that, that can be that honest, because in that honesty, at least you are telling the people you're screwing over that you're screwing them over. You're not lying to them in order to manipulate them into operating on incomplete information. You're telling them how it is so that they can make their own decisions. You're also telling your customers how it is so that they can make their own decisions. Like, to go back to, you know, the what is lost when time is saved thing, Henry, like Repbot, you know, if like outside success, you know, all the technical stuff works and everything, like every creator could have like a long-term kind of manager that knows more about them than their, you know, like than a manager that comes in for an early stage creator for like 3 years, right? Like, and you know, in that way you're kind of screwing over like these like early managers for creators. And I think being super upfront, you know, blunt about that, which you have been even on this podcast, to say like, you know, we're trying to
Yeah.
cut out the middleman, you know, like at least people know where you stand.
Yeah. I think that's important to call out. In my case, it kind of seems so simple, right? We're trying to make things more efficient by cutting out the middleman, you know, so that's who we're screwing. I think about another company in my space, like a Patreon of the world. We're
Mm-hmm.
helping creators facilitate paid memberships. Okay, who are they screwing? I might turn it back to you. I have an idea, but I'm not sure if it would be in their best interest to admit it. Do you want to chime in or should I continue?
So yeah, you continue. I have a thought, but it might take us
You
on a
might have a
different,
better thought.
no, it might take us on a different trail. You go.
How companies like Patreon work is they charge 10, 15% commission or revenue share on collecting all these payments. In terms of payment processing cost, that is extortion. But you're not really taking advantage of the small or the medium-sized creators. They're still only going to pay you a few dollars a month, a few tens of dollars, hundreds of dollars. The creators you're actually taking advantage of are the mega creators who are making millions, and you're charging them hundreds of thousands of dollars to be their payment processor. That seems exploitative, but I'm not sure if they should advertise that, because that's how they make their money, from the whales on the platform. Would you disagree with my assessment, or how would you navigate being honest about that?
No, I like that's exactly the one I was going to bring up, is that
Okay.
like in so many ways Patreon is screwing over creators, which is like completely antithetical to I think how they view themselves, and like even I'd say like how I view them, you know, like, but there is and when you say screwing over, I would replace that with exploiting, right? Like screwing over connotes that like it's mean, antagonistic, whatever, but what we're really talking about is like the like lowercase exploitation that is baked into how capitalism works. Like someone's got to be exploited because there's something left over at the end of the day. Like there's something someone collects. And yeah, in Patreon's case, they're screwing over creators by providing, you know, what seems like a inaccessible service, which is taking payments on the internet from their fans, and they're putting that in front of them and then taking back more than it costs them to run that service. Right. And so in that way, the creator is the one that's being exploited. And like you can be okay with like being the one that gets exploited. Like, but if you think about it, like all of the controversies Patreon has ever been a part of are because of that. It's because of whatever the number is that they're taking from creators. It's because of whatever they're doing to get in between, whatever that number is doing to get in between them and their fans. Like everything is centered around, like all the tension is centered around that piece of the pie, because that's the part that is the exploitation. But recognizing that as a founder, I think is incredibly important. How empowering is it to know that like, okay, like I make money by exploiting this group of people. So in order to make sure that, you know, my business survives, right, I need to make a calculation about, this is what businesses do, is like, how much can I exploit before I get, you know, pushback, get regulatory pressure, all that stuff. This is the thing of business. And I think the naive thing that a lot of founders do when they're starting and growing businesses is not understanding that they're exploiting a group of people and then falling into a sense of over exploitation that gets them in trouble. In so many ways, the thing I'd love to promote on this platform and this podcast is how, in some ways, do you minimize the exploitation? like if the exploitation is the thing that gets you in trouble, right? And is also, you know, like the thing that feels wrong, you know, like when you start to think about it, how do you make sure that like you get to sleep at night, your customers feel really good about, like your customers feel good about being exploited, right? Like Henry, yesterday I was talking to you about how like we're having some issues, you know, that might get resolved with like a supplier of the t-shirts that I'm selling to people, and that I might have to go with a like different supplier that makes an equivalent shirt that I think customers would be super happy about, but is cheaper for us to buy. Right. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to like send out a message, tell everyone what's going on, and then like refund everybody $2 a t-shirt. And you're like, Drew, stop, don't do that. But it's because I know that gap, right, is then exploitation, right? I'm selling something for more than it costs me to sell the thing for. And I know that to maintain a long-standing good relationship with our customers, I need to minimize that exploitation if I can't remove it at all, in a way that's still sustainable for the business, but feels right. And for me, right is like minimal, right? But what other things can I do with that like gap of $2 per shirt, right? Is like, okay, I could send everybody a coupon for the next order, right? So I don't have to be like charged with the refund fees from Stripe. Like there's a lot of stuff that can happen to make sure that exploitation is minimized with minimal damage to the business long term.
I hear what you're saying. You know, a lot of business comes down to exploitation. Nice people like you, why don't you join the Peace Corps right? Like
Hmm.
if you don't want to harm anybody and you just want to make the world a better place, just volunteer. Why choose business? And I think you voiced to me that entrepreneurship is a canvas for you to be creative and to solve problems and to express yourself. And I love that. Not very many entrepreneurs feel that way. I think a lot of entrepreneurs will ignore the very concept of exploitation to justify, I work really hard right now in my job. I don't want to work very hard in my job anymore, so I'm going to work double as hard to build something from scratch so that
Hmm.
I can step back and hire a manager to do my job or sell the business so that I could accumulate even more wealth. Both of those things are capitalizing on exploitation, but it's justified because I don't have to work as hard anymore. We live in a society where that's not evil. Like, that's just not
Yep.
evil. That is how we make progress. That is how we improve the human experience, right? Like, we have new companies, new services, new products to make the world better because of that almost like dissonance away from exploitation. Like,
And I
just
want to be clear
don't
that
even think about it.
I'm not trying to say that that's evil, right? If that's the position
Okay.
that you're in, right?
Okay.
Like, I'm not trying to say that that's evil. I'm trying to say that for your own self-interest, self-satisfaction with your life legacy, like your work even, it's important for us to understand that what we do as founders is exploitative. Like, it's important to recognize that so that, 10 years from now, when you wrestle with the like question of, do I deserve the things I have, right? Like, or, seemingly you get in some sort of like scandal about being a CEO that makes 500 times more than the like baseline employee, right? Like, you don't get to that point, right? Because you already understand this game of balance that has to exist in our economy for it to be sustainable long term. I mentioned last week this concept that like starting a business is an act of political protest. And this is part of that. Like, our economy is politics. It is our society. Like, none of these things are separate beings. And the way we operate in this world has downstream effects in the political and social problems we experience. And a lot of the problems we're experiencing right now are because of income inequality. And income inequality is directly correlated with how much entrepreneurs like us are exploiting our customers, our employees, our stakeholders at all. And so, I'm not saying, I don't think it's possible right now, like without mass revolution, for us to build any other different type of system. And I'm not really interested in that, right? What I am interested in is, how do I inspire you, Henry, to maybe not think that you have to join the Peace Corps in order to be a good person, but maybe say, like, how do we make founders better people? Like, we've got a bad rap right now for good reason, right? And it's this type of education of like understanding the game we're playing and how we could play it just slightly differently, switch our mindsets in teeny ways in order to still have the things that we want out of our businesses and also contribute long term to a like greater, brighter future for our society as a whole.
Yeah. And weaponize charisma for a moral good, right?
Weaponize rizz, baby.
Yep.
Yeah, if you think about other people that share charisma, like charismatic leaders, a lot of them are like activists, members of like political protest movements. A lot of them are politicians themselves. There's a reason that so often charisma leads to power, and it's that the way that human beings get more powerful is by having more human beings listening and acting on what they say. And with that power of charisma, then comes the responsibility of like making sure that what you're asking other people to do and the ideas you're promoting are good long term. So that's the thing that's really important about charisma. Any other thoughts before we switch over, Henry?
Nope, just lots to think about in terms of
So go ahead, cultivate rizz. Cultivate rizz. Just know what you're using it for.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, Henry, we have our last topic of this season of Just Business. Something I want to do now is just let everybody know, Henry and I have been doing this grand experiment of this podcast for a few months now. We've really enjoyed it. We're not going anywhere, but we are going to take a break until the new year. And so if you're listening to us now, have subscribed to us in your feed, you won't see us for a couple months, but we'll be back with a vengeance in January, and we're really looking forward to sharing season 2 with you. We've got some cool stuff cooking, and including something I haven't even talked to Henry about, but is interviews.
Yes.
Very, very exciting. Yeah, I've been emailing some people to come on the show and talk about some of the topics we're talking about with greater detail and knowledge than we have, and I think that's really exciting. So that all being said, let's hit our last topic, which, Henry, is how do you know when to go full-time as a founder? Tell me, Henry, your story with how you've fallen into currently, you are a full-time founder. Tell me how that happened to you and tell me how it's going.
Yeah, I don't feel alone. I think this is something that a lot of people get into where you get really enthusiastic about an idea, you get maybe disgruntled with your work, but it's more so the excitement of I get to be my own boss, I need to create something out of nothing, it's going to be a lot of work, and I need to be fully dedicated to make that happen. Therefore, go full-time, day 0. My story is, in order to make that happen, I've had to wear many hats: freelance, consult, start my own agency, pivot multiple businesses, do random work just to pay the bills. And that has actually detracted from my ability to make my company better and more viable. So I would caution against it for that reason, and for the reason of it puts more stress on you. So how can you be an effective leader with charisma when you have all this financial stress? So I guess to cut to the chase, my answer to how do you know when to go full-time? When you can get paid full-time. And you could pay yourself full-time. That's kind of like a bootstrappy route. Or get some investor to pay you full-time. But if you're not getting paid full-time, do not go full-time. It simply is not worth it for your own health or the health of the business. I know it's tempting. I've done it multiple times, but I would caution against it.
Yeah, my story is pretty similar. So I started Lumastic while in college, and after college, I decided to go full time based on the recommendation of many of my advisors who were saying to me that this is the most freedom you'll ever have in your life. You're not tied down to anything. You can live out of your car. Eat ramen noodles and everything. Your lifestyle has not inflated, is the point that I was saying. And so now's the time. So you should take it. So I applied to some accelerator programs, had some savings, and went forth to go full-time on the business. I was lucky to have a partner who had a job, and she paid for our apartment. So really, I'm just paying for the costs of running the business. And I did that for nearly 4 years, which is kind of unheard of in terms of trying to kind of bootstrap a business. I was really averse to raising money, which I've talked about on this show before. But yeah, I would say that my experience was similar in the fact that being full-time, I don't think actually helped me. I think it actually hurt me because I had no sense of financial stability, which is very important for being creative. Your general physical safety, the way that you feel about your own life is really important in terms of you being able to be creative and do things that no one has ever been done before. Yeah. And so I think that took a toll and was one of the reasons that I got burnt out is we ran out of money. So I had to start doing kind of similar to what you're talking about, odd jobs or pivoting our entire company to different industry sectors in order to try to make sales. It just was a bad vibe. We even then became I personally became intensely pressured to take investment, which was something I did not want to do because I wanted to maintain control of the company. But when you're strapped for cash, you're running out of money, you don't have a job, all of these pressures push you towards this venture-backed VC model, which is as we've talked about on the show before, and we'll continue to talk about probably for many episodes in season 2, get subscribed, is, not ideal for you or your business in so many ways, or even our society at large. Yeah. So if I had to sum it up, which I have in an article that if I remember to put it down, I'll put it in the description. My little pithy line for it that I also talk about in the book is stay part-time until you have none. So not so much like until you can be paid full-time. I think there is like a moment where it's okay to take a leap, you know, like bridging all the way, like sitting on a fence or like a moving chasm for a long time where you're trying to wait till you can fully move to the other end, like with complete safety. I don't think entirely is always necessary. If it can happen to you, great. But sometimes I feel like, at least in my own experience, it's hard to have 2 full-time salaries, right? Like with a startup while still having one that's from, you know, a company that you're working for, both because of the emotional pressure that you feel, like the amount of time that goes into building that type of business and to get to that point. For people that can do it, great, but I wouldn't expect it. So the thing that I would expect is for you to increasingly have less and less time because you are on call for support for your customers that you actually have and pay you, right? Like you are actively like squashing bugs because there are people that actually use your product and tell you they exist, right? like all of these things that like will lead you to realize that you're strapped for time, right? And that usually means that your business is like semi-successful in some ways and maybe could eventually support you. And I think that's the moment that you can decide for yourself and like talk to all the people in your life that would matter to say, okay, for the next, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to take a leave of absence. I'm going to do something. You can totally de-risk that part too, right? Like employers usually are like pretty cool about that and say, okay, I'm going to dip. I'm going to try this out for 6 months. If in 6 months I don't make it so that I'm making this amount of money, we're going to go back. And that's like a fair thing to do. So stay part-time until you have none.
I like that too. Yeah. The leap, the premature leap is just such a common trope.
Yeah. You're excited. You're amped.
And it requires excitement to do it. So you really have to fight against that, I think. And that's a hard thing to do, especially when there's a negative pressure of, I don't like my job. I don't like what I'm doing. I want to do this.
And the negative pressure, we are so biased against part-time founders. Like there is such a culture where like if you're part-time, you're running a lifestyle business, you're not serious, you're not committed, you know, like all these things that push you. And it's also the validation negative pressure that like I don't feel as much like an entrepreneur. I don't feel as much of a success if I'm not full time. And it's personally, like we're talking about, it is hard to shed that. But there is a reason why second-time founders have jobs. and there's a reason why second-time founders are often probabilistically more successful, right? Like they've learned stuff before. And one of the things they've learned is like having a sense of financial safety is a positive.
Yeah. No, that's a great takeaway. Amazing.
Boom. Well, Henry, we've reached the end of episode 14, I think. The last episode of season 1. I want to thank you, as always, for being here and doing this thing with me and listening to all my whack ideas. I want to thank everyone who's like posted comments or sent me an email or listened to any episode at all in this first season. Really, really pumped to be building this type of community around exploring these ideas of how do we make entrepreneurship a more valuable, positive social force in the world. And we're excited to have you along for the ride. Yeah, so get subscribed, be prepped for January, and we'll see you in the next one.